Okay, so I haven't done a video in a while. Figured I'd do one on my 350Z. Last year I totaled my old chassis, and that was in September. So we had a race in October, and I figured I'd go ahead and try and build a car in a very short amount of time for the October race. Luckily, all my suspension components and everything were in pretty good shape, so I was able to basically just retub the car. I dropped the subframes that have the engine and the rear diff and all that stuff from the old chassis, dropped them into a new chassis, built a cage, stripped the car, did all that stuff, and did it in roughly 2.5–3 weeks. For the amount of time I had allotted, I built a pretty darn good car, went out and took third out of I think 19 cars in the October race. But now that it's off season, I feel like I can put some more effort into this car, definitely tweak some things, make some changes, lighten it up, and get a little bit more competitive for the season coming up. So I figured I'd make a little video discussing a couple of things about the Z. I think it's an excellent little race car. There's definitely a lot of options out there. Our region has a huge Spec Z field, and we've really helped build that field, and there's a lot of good support. I feel like a Z is a great car for a lot of other regions as well. Super easy car to work on. I'm a huge Mustang fan. I feel like Mustangs make good race cars, 944s, the Porsche Boxster series and stuff's coming along. But the Z is very affordable, and it's a super easy car to work on. I don't think I've ever been around a car that's quite as easy to work on as the Z. And I do pretty much all of my own work now on it. Can swap a motor in 8 hours, rear diff, the whole rear subframe assembly can come out in a couple of hours, transmission swaps, you name it, I've pretty much done it, and it's all pretty simple. So I'll go ahead and throw this little video together about some setup changes and some things that you can look at when you're building a Z race car, and hopefully it's helpful. All right, here's my Z. Got a ton of stuff taken off on it right now, just kind of going through and cleaning some things up. I added a secondary oil cooler. I stacked them, trying to see what I can do about keeping some of the oil temps down, including the water temps. I've really been battling some heating issues, overheating issues in the car, and trying to find a way to keep away from heat soaking it so that the car stays competitive throughout the whole race. We run the KW suspension in the series. We run the stock Nissan Brembo brake kit. As you can see, I've got mine plumbed for brake ducting. I do have the Nismo version sway bars that are fully adjustable. This chassis is actually a little bit stiffer in the front end than my last one, so I find that I'm actually loosening up the sway bar notch on the front end. Aligning these cars is actually super simple. I have a string alignment tool that I take to the track and make sure that I have everything in alignment. And the toe is just adjusted by your toe links right here. Camber's adjusted by your upper control arm. I believe these are called the SPL control arms. But as you can see, it's actually pretty open, pretty easy car to work on. You take the bumper off, and you take all the under tray out and stuff like that, and it's pretty easy to get to everything. I just updated my Y pipe and my down pipes. I just picked up the Z1 Motorsport down pipes. They seem like they're a little bit more robust than the other ones. They don't have a flex joint in them, and this Y pipe is the Stillen Y pipe. It doesn't have a flex joint in it either. The flex joints just seem to keep on tearing apart on me and leaking, so I'm trying to stay away from that. I've got the Tomei catback titanium Nismo rear sway bar. I've pretty much got that set up to the rear or to the mid selection as well as the front. Go out there and I'm gonna run the car and make adjustments for the track day and according to how the track feels that day. Got the Nismo Pro 1.5 way diff in the rear with the Nismo cover, diff cooler mounted up inside the chassis. And the rear suspension adjustments for alignment are right here is your camber. right back here is your tow, and it's pretty simple to be able to adjust these cars. I've went through and replaced all the bushings with Nismo bushings in the rear, and then I've got we're capable of using a urethane bushing for the rear diff, so that's what's there. So the car, when it comes to suspension and all the components that way, is pretty much fully built. I've got the updated transmission. Seems like it's been working pretty good so far. Just overall a fun build, fun car to do. Currently working on putting in my hood vents and just lightening up the car. One of the things to keep in mind about your car setup is what's the car doing and when is it doing it. You know, is it understeering, coming out of corner exit? You know, are you fighting the rear end? Is it getting too loose on corner entry or corner exit? And those are the different things that you can adjust your sway bars and some of the suspension settings for. I find I like a car to understeer a little bit in the front and be a little bit oversteer in the rear based on, you know, how I get back on throttle application and things like that. So a lot of times I'll have a fully stiff front sway bar and a mid or a fully loose rear sway bar, and that's what it seems like my driving style in this car likes. But every once in a while, with brand new tires, I can fully stiffen up the rear and the front, get a little bit more speed out of the car. You know, fully stiff rear makes the car really tail happy once the tires start falling off, so you don't have a whole lot of time to get a fast lap in. But usually it is a little bit faster if you're a little bit more loose in the rear by oversteering a little bit more in the rear. Brake pad selection has seemed to be a pretty big deal in these cars. We can win hawk bucks and run hawks, but what we found is, you know, the Paget works really good. I don't know how Paget, whatever you say. Everybody seems to pronounce that one differently. I actually found that the Raybestos SD43 work about just as well, and they're about $100 cheaper for a set and last about just as long. So I really don't mind running the Raybestos in the front. These cars really like to start having ABS issues, I think, once the ABS pumps get hot. So sometimes, you know, I found that I just start running it without the ABS at all, just disconnect the ABS module and run a really light pad in the rear so I don't start locking up the rears going on the corner entry when I'm trying to trail brake. So there are definitely a lot of things you have to tweak and figure out about your own car and your setup, but nothing is worse than going into a corner, you know, and under braking and your ABS just all of a sudden decides to stop working and you start locking up. So instead of fighting that all the time, I just found that disconnecting my ABS and figuring out how to drive the car without it is more consistent. It's definitely a little bit more difficult, but it seems to work, and you know, then I'm not all of a sudden battling with inconsistent brake pedal feel and lockups and different things like that. This is the cockpit of my race car. As you can see, I've got the battery on-off switch right there. I've got my helmet blower and cool suit controls. I actually hooked up my fans. Let's see here if we can get a little bit better video. I hooked up just one fan. I've actually took one fan out of in front of the radiator or behind the radiator, and I just have one fan, but it's a 2-speed fan, so I've got one switch kicks it on low, the other switch kicks it so it's fully on high, and then the other side is just fully open to get as much airflow as possible. I've got a secondary fuel pump that transfers fuel from the driver's side back over to the passenger side, and that fuel pump basically connects right back into the driver's side, the passenger side fuel pickup that pushes from the pump to the fuel injectors, and so that really helps be able to run as lightweight as possible with as little fuel as possible without having fuel cut out. I've got a diff cooler with my differential fan and everything right there, and then this is my on-screen data. I've got a Sparco 300mm wheel. Been toying with the idea of going with a 320. Sparco seat. Good size mirror for rear visibility. Also helps with a little bit of side view. It's a good idea to go with like a spot side mirrors in these cars, especially if you're wheel-to-wheel racing. The stock mirrors on these cars just don't give you any idea that someone is next to you. So if you're wheel-to-wheel and you've got somebody coming up the side of your door, you just have no idea where they're at. And you know, it definitely can cause issues if you're turning into somebody. So it's a good idea to go with some spot mirrors. That's kind of the gist of the car, things that I've done to it. But if you're looking at getting into racing and you're not quite sure what to do with your setup, what I suggest doing is going fully tight with a sway bar in the front, maybe even disconnecting the rear sway bar, going fully loose. That's going to give you a complete understeer feel. Some guys still even race with that type of setup, but the car definitely feels a lot more planted underneath you. Once you kind of get more used to the car and you feel a little bit more confident in your ability to you know, control mistakes and things like that, then I would start maybe by tightening up the rear sway bar one notch, and you know, you could even do progressive, just one side and then, you know, the other, and kind of see how that goes, see how the car feels. Usually as you tighten that rear, of course it's going to make the rear a little bit more oversteer feel, so it could be a little bit more loose, but you might see your times drop a little bit more. One of the things to consider though is trying to run as many laps as you possibly can, as fast as you can with that type of setup, to see what happens as you wear your tires out. Because if you go out there with that type of setup with a oversteering rear end in a race, and it's a 30-minute long race, and you don't know what's going to happen towards the end of the race, it could really spell trouble for you, start getting really loose in the rear end, and put you in a position where you're losing time and give people the opportunity to pass you later in the race. So a lot of times you can make an adjustment and you're going to be able to go out there and feel what the car does right away, but it might not be the best idea to race in that situation. It's always nice to figure out what the fastest way to set your car up is for like qualifying or something like that, so you can go right out there, set your car up fast and go fly. But a lot of times the qualifying setup isn't as good for racing, just for the fact that the car could start to fall off, and you need to know what the car's going to do when it does that. So use your practice time wisely. Sometimes you just got to go out there and go full balls to the wall for 20 straight minutes and see how the car handles, and see what happens over time. Get used to that tire fall off, and heat soaking of everything, and some of the best drivers out there that I race against are the ones that know how to manage that, and they know what to do when the car starts doing that, so they're not flying off track and spinning and causing issues. So my suggestion would just be get used to the car, find what's comfortable, find a way to get fast, but then also find what makes the car feel good for a long period of time, and what makes you consistent. So hopefully this information helped. If you have any other suggestions or ideas, let me know. I'm going to try and put together a video on how to do that fuel transfer pump. Also probably do a video on a clutch swap with a lightweight flywheel. We've got a couple components that we can put on my brother's race car right over here. So as we do that, we're going to try and make some videos and help everybody out. Hope it helps. Take care.